Welcome to our clinical interviewing DVD. In this video, we describe and demonstrate a wide range of different clinical interviewing responses. Our goal is to help you further develop your clinical interviewing repertoire. The material in this DVD is based on our textbook, cleverly titled Clinical Interviewing.
You know, in our life as professors, we really have come to believe in that old kindergarten activity called show and tell. So in this video, we're obviously going to be telling you about clinical interviewing skills, but we also will be showing you video clips that illustrate these. And we really hope that together they'll combine to help you become excellent clinical interviewers.
And we begin with a focus on very basic interviewing and listening skills. Skills that everyone needs to do a really good clinical interview. These skills include attending behavior, non-directive listening, directive listening and action responses, as well as the skilled use of questions. Later, we move to demonstrating more complex assessment interviews, including intake, mental status, and suicide assessment interviewing.
You know, our overall goal in this DVD is to help you become aware of how to do the skills and when to do the skills. Awareness is an undergirding that's very important in conducting professional clinical interviews and in being a mental health professional.
You know, just a few years ago, Rita, although I might be underestimating that, we had a clinical supervisor who used to always say, don't fly by the seat of your pants. You need to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. You need to know where you're going, basically. Mm-hmm. And I think what he also is saying is that as clinical interviewers, we need to become more intentional. And so that's another goal that we have for this video, and that is we hope that it can move you in that direction so you become a little bit more intentional in your clinical interviewing activities. In the next 4 parts of this interviewing DVD, we focus on what we call the continuum of listening responses, beginning with the less directive, almost non-directive listening approaches, and extending to the more complex and directive interviewing or even action skills.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important before we actually talk about the techniques that we take a minute to think about a couple of things that are across techniques in interviewing. One is that because there's a power differential in the relationship, and we can never not communicate, the interviewer can be seen as directive even when they're not doing anything. It's just associated with the authority.
Yeah. Rita, that reminds me, and it goes without saying, but you know me, I'm going to say it anyway, that culture and the individual characteristics of the client are very important in the clinical interviewing process. Mm-hmm. For example, if you don't consider race, sex, ethnicity, and many other background factors, it may be that you'll be tuned out and insensitive to things that you're doing that might be off-putting to the client. For example, if you're listening closely and leaning forward and nodding vigorously, making great eye contact, but your client is sort of leaning backwards and looking awkward and uncomfortable, it's your problem. It is definitely not the client's problem, and you need to make some changes in your approach. I also find that there's a little subjectivity in how I respond personally to interviews. And for example, when you said, I understand, I just really kind of don't like that at all, because I think technically you can't really understand the deep experience of another person, mm-hmm. Especially if the person's from another race or another culture.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's very subjective, and there are, I think, some bad or ineffective ways of listening that aren't just ineffective. I think they are harmful. Or I think looking at your watch, glancing around, yawning.
Or maybe interrupting. Interrupting could be one of those negative behaviors.
Yeah, I agree. I think that across cultures, people have some kind of awareness or radar that tells them when they're not being listened to and they're not being respected. Yeah.
So I guess the bottom line is listen well, listen authentically for you, but also try to calibrate or adjust the way you're listening for the specific individual who you're with in the room.
Yeah. I think, too, I want to underline something I tell my students over and over again. Listening is a gift. Listening in our culture, being listened to very, very well, is really a rare and helpful gift. Let's talk about some of these listening techniques. The least directive set of interviewing skills, non-directive listening responses.
Right.
So the first one is Alan Ivey's attending behaviors. And these include eye contact, body posture, voice tone, and verbal tracking.
And Ivy wrote about those as basic micro skills that are always present in the interviewing interaction. In addition to those, there are also some non-directive listening responses. These include silence, clarifications, paraphrasing, and there are several different kinds of paraphrases people can use, reflection of feeling, and summarization.
Silence can be a very compassionate response. Just sitting quietly after somebody has shared their pain or their story can be difficult but very powerful. But the important thing is, John, you've got to have your body and your mind and your face all really connected to the client, really saying, I hear you, I'm right here in the room with you, I can handle this.
You know, I think that's a great point. Almost every student I've ever worked with has wished that they had exactly the right thing to say at the right time.
Right.
And sometimes silence is exactly the right thing to say, although I think especially for beginning interviewers, 5 or 10 seconds of silence can seem like an eternity. And so they can feel like they need to say something. And even myself, I've at times noticed I should put my hand over my mouth and try to stop myself from talking too much.
Verbal output, yeah. So silence certainly is a skilled tool and an important one, but of course, we also need some other non-directive techniques that we can use.
And tell me more about that.
Well, that was one, a verbal prompt. And also, we can use paraphrasing, which means just reflecting back the content that you've heard. Although I have to say something about that. When paraphrasing is done in a clumsy way, I think it can seem like you're mimicking the client. It can seem kind of robotic.
So what you're saying is that although you think paraphrasing is very important, you really don't like it when it's done in kind of a mimicky or robotic way.
Thank you, John, Carl Rogers, Summers Flanagan. I hate when you do that.
So what you're saying is you really don't like it when I talk like Carl Rogers.
Well, I like Carl Rogers, but so let's move on. How about this? How about you say something and I'll demonstrate a clarification?
Sounds good. You know, one of the things that is, I think, true for me is that sometimes in my students, I have observed them having naturally good listening skills. It's like they seem to be born to listen, while other students, it's more of a challenge for them and they need to work at it a little harder. But what I found is that virtually everyone is able to increase or improve their listening skills. And so that kind of gives me hope for everyone.
So what I think I hear you saying is that listening skills and abilities can be something someone naturally has, more or less of. But in the years you've worked in this area, you've realized that everyone can learn to be a better listener. Did I get that right?
Absolutely right, and it feels good to be heard. And so now, let's watch the magic of listening skills in action. Now this video clip begins a couple of minutes into a session where the client, Jesse, is talking about a roommate problem. The therapist, Megan, has a very gentle and accepting style, which allows Jessie to explore her concerns in depth. Early on, you should especially watch for Megan's paraphrase about Jessie having no time for herself, because there's not even a hint of a robot in the room.
That, I can't. So, I don't know. I feel like she uses me as like a sounding board, and I get nothing in return.
You said several times while talking that she doesn't listen to you, or doesn't even give you the opportunity to talk. It seems like she just talks, and then you're listening, and that's exhausting, or kind of getting angry and irritated by it.
Yeah, I do. It's just frustrating when somebody comes and they talk to you for like half an hour about all of their problems, and then it's like once they're done, they're like, okay, I don't care about how you are, what you're doing. So, bye. Like she'll go off and do whatever, or watch TV or something, and whenever I do try to talk to her, she's like either playing a video game on her phone, or she'll just start in with, oh, did that happen to you? That happened to me too. And it's just like, oh my gosh. So.
And she'll go on to what
and then she'll just go off about her own story, and I'm really just, I care about our friendship, because it's been like a 5 or 6 or something year-long friendship. And so I would like to continue that. And so I think we could still be friends if we didn't live together, but the whole not living together part has to be crucial.
Yeah. It seems like you've talked a lot about the different things that you're dealing with within this relationship with her, in terms of not being heard and not enjoying being around her anymore, and not wanting to go home.
That's the worst part.
And feeling frustrated by it, but also just, it almost seems like you're not sure what to do about it.
Yeah. I guess I'm just not sure how to bring up not living together anymore. Part of me, I'll be gone for the summer, so part of me thinks that would be a way, because like she has to find a new place or continue to pay rent where we are, and I don't want to have to do that. And so part of me wants to be like, well, I'm just not going to be here, so we can't live together because of that. Because you need it to, get into a place and start paying before I'll even be here. And so I kind of want to just approach it that way, but that's definitely not confronting the real reason of why I don't want to live with her. So,
what's hard about that, about confronting her?
Because I don't like confrontations, and I don't like making people feel upset, and I'm pretty sure that she would cry and get defensive and angry, and we couldn't continue a friendship. It would be like, I'm a horrible person for this, and she wouldn't want to be my friend. I would just imagine her getting defensive and like blame me or something.
So when you think about confronting her, you think about you think that it would end the relationship. Am I getting that right? Or that it would kind of lead to that?
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Because honestly, I want to say, I can't stand your dogs, and I can't stand your attitude, and I'm so exhausted with you, and I can't continue to live with her. That's how I feel.
That was really nice. Before we showed that video, we didn't really talk about summarizing or summarization. Summarizing can really be a great technique to use, partly because it forces you to listen so well, because you're going to list the main points that you've just heard.
Yeah, and I think Megan did a great job of that, especially because for myself, and I think many people I know, it's so easy for the points that you're listening to kind of evaporate in your mind as you're trying to formulate this summary. And she did a great job. She identified that the client was feeling very unhappy in the roommate situation, that she was not wanting to come home, that she didn't feel heard, that she really didn't even like her roommate anymore.
Yeah, that was a great summary. One warning is probably not to number the items that you're going to say, because you can get to number 2 and suddenly have no idea what number 3 was. So John, there's one last skill that I think maybe we should talk about before ending this segment, and that is called the reflection of feeling.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad that you remembered that. I find myself, as we go through this production process, it's sort of nerve-wracking. I feel nervous, I feel anxious. I try to kind of keep a external composure, but on the inside I feel pressure. I'm worried that we'll make mistakes and that maybe it's going to be not helpful or even worthless, or even the worst possible scenario, that I would just terribly embarrass myself.
Yeah. So lots of feelings there. You feel anxious, you want this to go well, you have kind of this calm veneer, but underneath there's anxiety, there's a kind of worry that this won't go well, and it just spirals down to the point where we might be wasting people's time, and really you might just be embarrassed.
That is very nice. You did a great and accurate job of kind of identifying a range of different emotions that I'm feeling. And I have to say, I really appreciate the fact that you stayed with the basic non-directive reflection of feeling. You didn't interpret anything. You didn't try to go for my deep-seated neuroses.
Right. Oh, no, it was tempting. And in the next sections, we'll have opportunities for that. But our time's up for this section, and we'll move on to more directive listening and action responses.